Short mandala. By directing to the field of Buddhas, this mandala is splendid with a base of flowers, saffron water, and incense. Adorned with Mount Mary, the four continents, the sun and moon, may all sentient beings be led to this field. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kandirya Taya. To the Buddha, the Dharma, the highest destiny, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. I thus listen to teachings and so forth, and I attain Buddhahood to benefit all transmigrators. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. I thus listen to teachings and so forth. May I take Buddhahood in order to benefit all transmigrators. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. I thus listen to teachings and so forth. May I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all transmigrators.
Tambole samale konda tele shishirwa ane tat sa tere sa ni marwa ra
No, Salap.
Salapala ne ando sharani bushi goro to seta sharani to shene to sitarwa ho to sita.
Okay. So, good evening to everyone, and being Wednesday, we are on the explanations of the Heart Sutra.
Hoto setene ade sharani mu all yore sanatirta. Tachidan sharani muti kasanga Geshe Shetati Shechingi Sanjigi Chokorimba Sum Korve Dinale Chokorimba Nibati Komodoro Hara Ambo Chokorimba Tambo Kapsu Den Dambashi di Pa Chitan Dambashi di Kone Shidaki Yabushita Soyo Marwa, that's Sabushita Soyo Marwa. Koto Shita Chokorimba Nibatandati Ati Shechingi Dos and a Sere, Tadra Shechingi Dos, Tadi Shechingi Dos and the Yedu Mangboya Bacharwa.
Yes.
And the sharing Buddha and the Dushu Yerwa, Dushu Tadi to Sora Tat Teape One Shupado Pe Sanjarangi Shani Suba Mai Bache. And Sheripogi Genesis Tivashu Tilla Genesis Lane Cabne and it is Sanjagi. The opportunity to shows and so they are that initiated the watch Tivatiagi Tivati the Sanjagi Chingala Tivata Sheripo Tivati Cousin Ketchwa. What nation to say, what to see that.
Okay, so as we covered last time, that this Heart Sutra, in terms of the three turnings of the wheel of the Dharma of the Buddha, falls within the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. The first turning of the wheel of the Dharma, Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths and did not go in great detail into the profound aspects. In the second, he taught the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, and there are many extensive and brief forms of this, and of them, the Heart Sutra is the briefest. And also, it is not spoken directly by the Buddha, but arises as a questions posed by Shariputra to Avalokiteshvara, and then the responses from Avalokiteshvara, which after that occurred, then the Buddha kind of affirmed it saying this was kind of very good. And the question and answer by Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara arose through the blessing of the Buddha.
to Shetine, to Srita, is Kasanta, 60s, Lagi Machina, see the Dioiba. Check Badwa. That is it, some of the Kajach Mata. Tene Sanjigat, Chumde de Sichidunya Barshabachero.
Yes.
Chumde de Sichidunya Barshaneta, to Istunya Barshaneta, Kumkin Shudukala. Tashian get to a treat much I draw Chadiarwa, that Kilomat Mobile Cormo put it in the earth. In a tatikabla, that Shereputa, Cheresata, the Nevesage Digedi, Sama Yosarva, the Nevesage is the Sanjay Kola you can get charges somebody like you don't get a shade there. That the Casante changes somebody get it, Cherry Six Chana Toje. Chambache, Honey, say Nimbo, Dhonam cell, and a good to Sambo, just about good to Sambo. Tachana Toje, what to say?
Sign Namkaning. Okay. So at this time, again, just kind of touching on the points of the text that we've already covered. At this point, the Buddha was in a one-pointed concentration, and thus being in meditation, although there were many entourage gathered, there was no opportunity to directly pose questions. And so there was this discussion between Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara. And Avalokiteshvara was one of the 8 close Bodhisattva disciples of the Buddha. And so all these Bodhisattvas would have been there. And we just to go through the names. Jinrazik, Avalokiteshvara, Vajrapani, Manjushri, Maitreya, Samandabhadra, Savanirvarana Viskambin, and Ksitigarbha, in English is the Erstwhile Bodhisattva, and the final one, the treasure of space, Sayanimbo.
Nga suyo jesi ya shugen sama manches chana dujere dwa chana dujere do tamashi tanda tanda nga tamari te ine tat tanda te jeresi ta hanjo simba te sama yosar erwa yosar ta kelonge kende chimbo ta sa chanjo simba kende chimbo khasanga lo kemo chwa chimbo mangbo yebeke charwa odu shude khalta ene ane sherepula Tiwa Karsa or Sheripola, Chanju Samba Cherisla, Tibetan Degolochi Leberwa, Tibetan Degolochi data, Sanji Chingela Beres or Sanji Chingilane, and it or the other cousin then Sanji tweets that the Machine watch and use so much over Cheris. Want you let the gate him as what the case one, Reggie Power. Rebo Sherry Port so much about our chas to Studigola. That Tibachimbo Rigi post the Tibachimbo Rigi against Sigora or the Candid Lab Koreas, not then, not changes about changes the change somebody, Papa Cherry Sigita, said that the Machine posta, Ma Person Yorvatadima, Lake Yuduga, Rigi Port, Ribo, Kanala Sherry, so much about Tita number 30. Tatambo. That was one to get up to Gapa cheek soon. Then one not get sick that Devecone. Then don't do chin Susha Yoshua, Manjamata, the Katigadi, Grota Chimakit Shay or the Tonerva. What did it? That Geshe de la one to like Everchine, Lapsute Sundugola Tatela. Lamata Janis Gorba. lamwan chane sundingala ane solam lamwan ne solam tan lam thangbo ni solam tan jonong kapso tepa da samba gomba sungi goneta la chuti sung bareta de soede khasangando tat khasan chin sabareta de tene pombo ngobo teta jana shi tomara ya ta bache so tao ne ane su tomba ni su tomba ni su je mai no te jendo so wata to je nabar shebana tomba oso te par chin sabare ro
Yes.
che ta tring tene ma khar towards na yang khasan de Geshe ta mombo shi ma ta do ro tene kreta karsana tholam ke kapsu ane ta lam lap se de ma sungora ta tholam 가서 sama kebar kede keje shigre dade kanje de sherepo teta chotam je tobani de tsingi me ba ma ke ba ma ga ba tema me ba tema ta tawa me ba khawa me ba os hota di tsik dige monte me tati pa to thonam kapsla tatri ma ga tishen to iswa
Yes. Okay. So that of these 8 close Bodhisattva disciples, Vajrapani was the disciple who mostly requested most of the tantric teachings. And although all the bodhisattvas would have been there, as it says that there were kind of a great assembly of bodhisattvas, a great assembly of the ordained, of those who were ordained. And so Shariputra, in asking the question to Avalokiteshvara, was this request arose through the blessing of the Buddha. And so this we have said to the spirit Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, how should a child of the lineage train who wishes to engage in the practice of profound perfection of wisdom? So the child of the lineage is one of the Mahayana lineage. So how will they train? And then the Bodhisattva, the Arya Janrasic, made the reply. The great Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, replied to the Venerable Shariputra as follows: Shariputra, whatever son or daughter of the lineage who wishes to engage in the practice of profound perfection wisdom should look perfectly and correctly like this. Also looking perfectly and correctly at the emptiness or inherent existence of the 5 aggregates. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, and form is not other than emptiness. Likewise, feelings, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. So that first, these explanations, in the detailed explanations of how to train, were given for those of duller faculties, and for those of sharp faculties, there is the brief explanation in relationship to the mantra, which we come to later. So in this most detailed explanation, it is applied to the 5 paths, and we've covered to this point where of likewise feelings, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. And so this covers the time of training on the path of accumulation and the path of joining, and through the powers of hearing, reflection, and meditation. And so now we come today to training at the time of the path of seeing. And it said that 8 aspects of the profound. And this is the paragraph: Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are merely empty, having no characteristics. They are not produced and do not cease. They have no defilement and no separation from defilement. They have no decrease and no increase.
no to reta dusre not solam te cholam kapsu shirchin la ta toni la skurwata toni la thoba samba doche tikala ta komjo de ta gomba de chigre rwate komjo ke ta cholam khaptu ta toni la shine dal shin shila sunde thopsuna ta cholam ke dorwa
Yes.
cholam ke dore te ta solam te cholam kapsu ta toni topa da yor de ine to do tunje sugi to de yorwa ra
Yes.
tunje sugi to de yor ma to che tanda tunje de dene to de yor tunje sugi Tunji the Dene to the Yamato Musum to Toyamara and Goa.
Oh, then,
Musum Toyamarta Musum to Totugala, that Tolam the Podorwa.
yes,
Lamde Tolam Chadre, Kansate Tolam Pacharo, the Papa Chasorwa.
yes,
All those puppets. That so that Tanda de Tanda Tolam Gake up Sutanda Keper Ye Jaredi. Nunda the Namtar Gosum the Java.
then,
Namtar Gosum the Jane Yungore. That Tambodi Siba. Here but the Chetam Tomba Nite Sidicala.
yes,
That Tony Namtar Shivisar. Shere but the Chetam Tomba Nite Stata. Jolam Gake up so Tony Comgi or the Tony Comdu Galape. Tony to the Tunji the Dene Co Comte Orwa.
yes,
At the day, Jolam Gake up so Tony Comte the pay more compared the Chene. Musum go Portugala. That dinala ina nupsarata, Nina Nurta.
yes,
Denayo, Denat called Kunzu Benayo, Mare Ninayo, Mareva.
yes,
Yamino that or the Ranshi Tombata, Tombanite said it.
yes.
Tony Namtar Kosum, Tony Namtar, Sigdimatoyo, Mareva.
Then, okay, so that the time of the path of accumulation and the path of joining, one's experience or understanding of emptiness arises through hearing, reflection, and meditation, and it in particular in terms of the factor of meditation, when we generate calm abiding combined with penetrative insight, then one moves to the path of joining. And at that time, while one has a realization or a conceptual realization of emptiness, it is not a direct perception. It's what the term is a generic image. It is emptiness is understood through a mental concept. And to have a direct perception, one must move to the path of seeing, and then one becomes a being of the path of seeing and an Arya or noble being. And on the path of seeing, there is the 8 aspects of the profound, which are applied to the 3 doors of liberation, or the 3 doors of thorough liberation. And so this begins with this sentence, Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are merely empty. So that's the emptiness phenomena is the first, the door of liberation of emptiness. So just that first point there. And that when one is meditating on the path of joining on emptiness, which when one's meditation is mixed with this generic image or mental concept, as the strength of that increases and one comes to the point of a direct perception of emptiness, at that point there is no conventional appearances arising and no dualistic appearances. And so that phenomena being merely empty refers to that point.
Chitan Tante Sharan Mutsina Yobana Shiti Masheti Geneta, Namtar Kosum de Tanda Mashirwa.
Yes.
Or to study Tanda Mutsi Tatine, Tingi Meba, Mageba, Magaba, Chima Meba, Chimatan Trawa Seti, Tingadwa.
Yes.
Mati Namtar Kosum Rene, Semen Namtalajar.
Yes.
In a Tante that is this Shigirwa.
Yes.
Le Twa Mepata, Kawa Mepati, Namtar Kosum, and Meme Namtala to shower.
Okay, so I'm going to explain these 3 points of the 3 doors of liberation, referring to the text, and then go back over and explain the meaning of each of those. So then the next door of thorough liberation, or signlessness, is the next 5 points, having no characteristics they are not produced and do not cease, they have no defilement and no separation from defilement. And then the last 2 points, they have no decrease and no increase, apply to the door of thorough liberation of wishlessness.
Tate Sini me passe de ranking old to be good singing me passe. Takajata ranking old to be good singing or must that turn them better in the jet or wrong old was not good, turn them barra. Kota ranking old to be good singing me pace. The name Kiwa me pa Makiwa Magapa said the Debu Kengaki Debu Kiwa the Kapa ranking old to be me passo to sin church.
Yes.
Tene Tima me pasidola, kuni nyumo chogi ta hero, kuni nyumo chogi.
Yes.
Timate ranshingi me pas dire. Trawa me pa trawa. Timata trawa me pas de. Karsa. Tima me pa karsa. And that's in your magaba. Tima me pas de. So tipa me was de. Kuni nyumo chodere derwa.
Really?
Mother trawa said namjangi cho.
Yes.
남자는 좋다 남자는 좋다 기회 줘서 그다 그다 코발 또 수딩들와
Yes.
들도다 야 란싱이 두바다 지마다 타와데 란싱이 요 말에서 세야 되더라
Yes.
어다티 도시대가 되기도 어다티 시다시다래 세보랑 차라데스 가고야로 시다 동부터.
Okay, so starting from the having no characteristics. No characteristics means in terms from the ultimate perspective, the causal aspect of the entity has no characteristics or lacks inherent characteristics. Second, then the second point, having they are not produced and do not cease. That in terms of the arisal and ceasing of results, there is no inherent entity. There is no inherent entity. And then they have no defilement and no separation from defilement. So defilement refers to the afflicted aspect, so that of afflictive emotion, that these lack inherent existence. And separation from defilement refers to the thoroughly purified aspect or the virtuous aspect, or one could say the way one ceases cyclic existence, and that also lacks inherent existence.
어다 티와메 바다 타디 타마디 티와메 바스데 반제 교인스로와
Yes.
그 티와메 바스데 티와란신기 메바 티와타 티와키 티와스데 세바세아도죠.
Yes.
이게 요 말이스. 아니 가메 바스도 투제 윤데 대란신기 세바요 말이스야도죠. 어다도스. 다 간제 간다. 먼저 더 마스는 메도 타징어도 요 타말와기 지 최되게디 예와당 가바당 다지 반자초 세다 진예보게라 스포트도페 근데 요발라 때네코 안에 되게 란싱이 또 받sin 거봐
Yes.
어때도 가에 제도도 세 송샤와 인사를 다되는 데 다디지 바이사 단다 셔러닝보 좀 셔러닝보 맞다 자와셔럽기 최적의 가서 개와 개와메 메세와 어다 도저 돈다도 지바 있어래.
I think I've got that. Okay, so that and then the last 2 points of no decrease and no increase, that again all those that are that in terms of decrease referring to that which is abandoned, all those that are faulty and saying is not inherently existent, and likewise all that which is attained or qualities lack inherent existence. So one could say for the lowest philosophical schools of Buddhism, or more generally for ordinary beings, all these phenomena that arise and cease, the objects of abandonment, the antidotes, are grasped at as truly, as inherently existent. And so in order to overcome, to refute that, grasping at those things as inherently existent, this was taught. And it is similar to the homage of Nagarjuna's root wisdom, which is he who taught dependent origination, no cessation, and no origination, no annihilation, no permanence, no coming, no going, neither different nor the same.
가서 계제셔요. 가서 계제. 가서 계제셔. 다들 된다 치고 있다데 사와셔라 때 개발 랍제 개발시도 갈때 레레신도 배 트란시기 메스 소용도 와. 다들 된다 다 간제 간다. 남타로 고스um 나라다 사마드디 거래와 남타 고스. 남사 고스 this 고아차야다 다데 개치 못 오시려.
Okay, so we find in the homage to root wisdom these 8 points, these 8 points of reputation, which has the same meaning as these points here. And then in each chapter, it goes through all these different points in great detail and how the phenomena lack inherent existence. And here it relates to the 3 doors of thorough liberation. And to understand the 3 doors of liberation, thorough liberation, is important.
남들 고스인데 돈이 남들 세메 남들 몸에 남들 세대가 남들 voilà 근데 인치치 거란 세워도 남들 세건 달베 고세와 다데 가르선다 단다데 도 바바유 코르경기 시베 도세처럼 바바유 코르경기 시베 도나라 가르선이었으나 동바 시바 개와 메베출루스 동바스나 돈이남 타레 시바스나 세멘남 타레 개와 메바스나 메메남 타레와 동바 개와 메베출 어디 출세 시츄에이션과 메데 미시베네 도와치 비어봤다 근데 동바 시바 경 고스음데 마시바 손사 안 도바 코아나라 캠테게레스로 동바 시바 경 메베스 미시베네 도와치 비어봤 다 대다 투징아베 탑술게 리반 야다케네 주바제스 다데 동바 시바 경 메바스음데 셰게 제도 산게 투지쟁기 안에 리반 망보데 야다스나 망보스를 쓰는 망보스로 망보송 열어서 다 돈이 되게 리반 망보송 열봐 어디 열어서 또 세요.
Okay. So Geshe is making reference to a particular sutra that I'll have to check the name of, that says that makes it the way of emptiness, pacification, and arising. So emptiness referring to the door of the thorough liberation of emptiness. Pacification is referring to the door of signlessness, and arising the door of wishlessness. That not knowing these 3 beings wander in cyclic existence. Therefore, in order for beings to understand these 3, the greatly compassionate Buddha taught hundreds of reasons to establish this. So hundreds of reasons referring to the many reasons to establish emptiness.
Okay, that Tony Namtarta, there Condano Boche, 6 sable shoes, Condano Boche Carson, and Tomba Seti. Churangi ngo dembeto churangi chukarina ruati rangi ngo dembeto ati toni sedrewa tomba sede ati toni nam tala charwa teche ene sebe sede tanda de pechati Dhonam Shiva said, Page Munachana Seminam Taredo. That they call ourselves. She digity then some Toma Mebane Tuntambar, your Manyomba, Nima your Manyomba reserva.
Yes.
Manyope, Ane Sema Meba, Shiva did Sema Mebas. Chukarena Tomane could Dempa was Nima Chunu Yomarva.
Yes.
What are they? So many Shiva that pet choosing and so many Shiva Sigre Yaman or Seme said Shiva said, and after said teaching. I'll teach it.
Okay. So there's a very good quote from Compound Rinpoche about emptiness. That first referring to the door of thorough liberation of emptiness. Whatever phenomena it is, its nature lacks true existence. Nature is empty. So that's the first door. Then the second of signlessness or pacification, that since beginningless time, there has never been an arising of a truly existent phenomena.
What to say? Kill me by said it. Mount Banaya, Mount Ban Chukarena, Turn Tamper, I give a missy barba.
Yes.
Tenichilla, Ane, give me by Senata, some Memenam Thursday. What was.
And then the third of not arising, that referring to or wishlessness, that in the future whatever arises has no ultimate existence. There is no truly existent phenomena that will arise.
What was it? Namthar Gosum the Jasul Mambo Yarta, Jasu Mambo Sanata, Jasu Tuta to look at Dembashila Jasu, Tati Peconio Poyore. That than the Tajuba Oma to look at that. Gu Depu Mos like Jasu Chayore. Java Chachelesum, Java Chepapo Le, Chachelesum Jasu Chayore. Or that take it Keche, that take it share where the Keche.
Yes. Okay, so there are many ways that these three doors of thorough liberation can be applied. In the lower schools, they use them, applying them to the Four Noble Truths, but that becomes kind of quite confusing in terms of the middle way school. In the consequentialists, they apply these three to the entity, the cause, and the result, or to agent, action, and function.
Otoseta, good Depu Mosum like Jargina. Because the Tangos pay code the witch and the pay say which a marshagina today. But then you put the witch in Arwa, Nuko. You go send it, this was you over yet, you over yet. You go Korangi, more 20 Madrugade. You would think it Tony Namtare, you would think it Tony Namtare. And then you go turn Tampa Gule Mikiba. You go Gule care, then you go pay stability, and you would turn Tampa Gule care, you go turn Tampa care, Marva. But that you would think it's Semen Namtare. And then Nuku, turn Tampa Dibu Missimba. Nuku, turn Tampa Dibu Gigmar said, Nukuchita, you Dibu Gigreco. Nuku Gipe, $6, but the Gigro, for pushing the Gigre. You could turn Tampa Dibu Chingimare said, Memen Namtare. What those?
Okay, so applying this to cause, entity, thing, and result, it's very clear if we use a sprout, just the ordinary sprout as the image. So a sprout, its entity does not ultimately exist. So that is the emptiness door, in the door of thorough liberation of emptiness. And then in terms of that sprout, it arises from a cause, which is the seed, but it does not rise from ultimately existing cause. And so that is signlessness. And that sprout does give rise to a result like fruit and so forth. But again, the results are not ultimately existent, and that is wishlessness. Loss.
Tony Namtar, you would think it's Semen Namtar, you would think Meme Namtar sum to Silva.
Loss.
That you would correct the Tony sum, Tony Mindawa sum charswa.
Loss.
Or that way, some charcoal they can say Karisana. You could temper Zimbe. Denze Dugala, Keta Mindawa sum Kigger's house on.
Loss.
You go correcting or touching them but to Shas and the temper to Bananga, and you could temper to Banana. Honestly, I knew them but to Barashas and sing or a new palbats were what here was. They think or yeah, I could say, then you could Savile Ketukalaya, you could turn temporarily Kesha some girl.
Loss.
You could turn temporarily Kesha something, and I knew you could turn temper to Basigua.
Loss.
Look, that Denzi Kigdo.
Loss.
Yeah, that you would teach Chembochana, Chembochana, the Velaco, Dibu Shinto and the Shinto and the Kedolata, you could get that. Ah, turn number Dibu Chingido, some Garwa, turn number some tattoo that you could turn number Dibu Chingina, then you would turn number of Shasana, you would turn number below. You could turn number to by Ketsu de la or a more good Dibu in Ketsu Minda some Gone, there's some Gobi Chedo. Namtarkosum Teota to several tatus.
Yes. Okay, so we can see that on one phenomena, we have applied the 3 doors of thorough liberation, the door of emptiness, of signlessness, of wishlessness. So these 3 aspects or ways of looking at emptiness. So the reason why there's this system applied is because it is said that we grasp at true existence of a sprout in 3 different ways. That the sprout itself appears to us as truly existent, and we grasp at the entity of the sprout as being truly existent for an ordinary being. So that's one way. And then others who may think about what causes the sprout to arise, thinking of the seed, think that the seed is ultimately existent, and so because the seed is ultimately existent, they are thinking they grasp both at the true existence of the cause and the true existence of the sprout that arises from that. And then others may grasp at the results that as the sprout grows and gives rise to the result like fruit and so forth, that thinking that these results are ultimately existent, then therefore the sprout itself must be ultimately existent. And so giving these 3 different ways of grasping at true existence, then that relate to the entity, the cause, and the result. To refute those 3, we have the 3 doors of thorough liberation.
How to say that Tele Tachevati Namtarkosum telepathies, Namjunga zone. She de Kode Tireta, Chancelesum Chasuterva.
Yes.
That Chancelesum Chasuti Condensresana. Tamazo. Pena gomla chargina, ama chimbala chargina, chimba,
Jimba, nos,
chimbala tene, chimbala chargina, chimbe yulu yorwa, chimba tangsa yul,
nos,
chave yul se rwa,
nos,
ote, tembar mepate, tere, seme namtare,
nos,
chimbe seme namtare. Chimba tangken chepapo yorwa,
nos,
chimba tangken chepapo, demba madhupa, ta tuentamba madhupa yungarwa. Ko tate, chimbe teke mewe namtare,
nos,
mewe namtare. Na chimba korang yorwa, chimba rang, rwa.
nos,
Kita chimba kono tate, le rwa ta. Chebe yung, le rwa. Ta chida chimba korang, ta ko chimba korang tuentamba madhupa yorwa, temba madhupa. Te, tere, chimbe tenge, tonyi namtare.
nos. Okay. All right. Then if we have the subtler way, it's actually object loss.
Te sarama cha chewasana te namgyu yongda tsangma shedea.
Nos.
Tawa serme ke tawa mara, tawa darapa.
Okay.
Chewasana te me, tama namgyu mabonga to kala yodea dise. Cha chewa.
Tracha.
More,
Another, that's different. So more a generally known way of looking at it is relates to agent object. I got one of those wrong. Agent, object, and action or function. And so we could apply this to generosity. So you have the recipient or the object of generosity, and that lacking of true existence is the door of signlessness. Then we have the agent, the one who engages in generosity. Their lack of ultimate existence or lack of true existence is the door of wishlessness. And then the action of generosity itself, and that action lacks true existence, and that is the door of emptiness.
Oda te ta kanche kadar ta ta na shingi te chimbala tene namgyu de chimbe korsum siwa.
Nos,
Chimbe korsum siya ta gare. Ta ta na son gewa ngoe la sanu ta na nga to gewa nge korsum siwa.
nos,
Gewa ngoyu pe chanchu marti pa ta nga to ngorwa sanje ka. Chanchu marti pa chanchu de chabe yul terwa ngokenge kansa ane gewa ngowa herwa te. Ote te lerwa. Ote sum demba me bate nga to korsum me pa shewa.
nos,
Ogozo ota tiri ta kajet. Chetan tanda gewa ngoya la tagina ye. Mo gewa ngoya kitela tembar zintamenda wasum chajale sum tene tembar zintamenda wasum yung sirwa.
nos.
Ote te tope chedu. Ote namdar korsum tos charsudwa otos.
Okay, so that in this, similarly, we talk about the emptiness of the three spheres, for example, in relationship to generosity, or specifically also in terms of dedicating virtue. We speak of the emptiness of the three spheres, which is the dedicated object is to until the attainment of enlightenment. The agent is the person making the dedication, and the dedication itself is the action. So thinking of all those three things lacking true existence. So thus, when we make a dedication of virtue, we have these three different ways of grasping at its true existence, and to overcome these, then we have the application of the three doors of liberation. So we talk about this, the three spheres that lack inherent existence.
Gomla janin, gomgi chajele sum jareva, sans regionala, sand regional, Otus, Ajeta Namtar Kosumde, Masheba, Koala Cambares de Namada Kosumji Docho, that Dembertoba Mendewa Sum Kitsubi. That dish to Takanje, take a church. Semen Nam Church getting a Tony Namtar Kosum de Nane. Semen Namtara, Meme Namtade, Tony Namtana, the Duke.
Yes. Okay, so through not knowing, start again. So we can see that you can apply the emptiness of the three spheres to generosity or to dedication, or in Guyasmaya's root tantra, they apply it to, Geshe quoted that it was applied to meditation, to the kind of the object of meditation, the meditator, and the action of meditating. And through not knowing these three doors of thorough liberation, sentient beings wander within cyclic existence. And to understand them, we antidote these three different ways of grasping at true existence. So this is also an important point. If one considers the three doors thorough liberation in regard to one phenomenon, one can condense the doors of signlessness and wishlessness into the door of emptiness. Yes.
You could think it's seven tarta, you would think a meme tara. Nika, you would think it turned up a maduba.
Yes.
You would think it turned up a maduba in Switzerland, Minda was sumi Sharwa.
Yes.
And then you could turn up a Gule Makeva there, and you would think it turned up a maduba.
Yes.
And you would turn up a Gule Makeva there, you would think it on your there.
Yes.
You would think it on your telaya, Minda was sum.
Yes.
That on your Tana Dugu Hashini, or Tenashita Chajeles, not chatter.
Yes. So that these three aspects of the cause, the entity, and the result, or the thing and the result, that if we consider the sprout, the lack of ultimate existence of the sprout is the door of the emptiness, and that sprout arises from a cause that is not ultimately existent, meaning that the sprout itself is not ultimately existent. That is signlessness, but you can see that also falls within the emptiness of the sprout itself, the door of emptiness, and that it does not give rise to an ultimately existent result, which is wishlessness. That lack of an ultimately existent sprout also relates to the sprout itself that lacks ultimate existence. So there are three ways that we grasp at it, and three ways that we overcome it. Yes.
You would think it turned up a maduba. You were ranking more temperament. You would think it's Semenam Tarda, you would think a Memenam Tartodorva.
Yes.
That's what ko mendawa namthar gosum se sheba ma to je te de sum de gawa marwa
Yes.
sumba de gawa mer sumba gawa ina sumba de loga ina ta ja ai shunda gal dorwa shego nyeba meba ai shego mendawa sum shabu cherwa shego mendawa sum ina koyan kyo ma shego nyeba yo mar sin so yo
Yes.
tabe gochi ma de yo ma tabe gode karsin tonye ran rewa
Yes.
tonye le los yo mar tonye de la mendawa zinda mendawa sum shabayina tonye to balo de la zinda mendawa sum shabayina ya shunda gal dorwa dos
Okay. So that in terms of the sprout, its nature is not ultimately existent, and that the lack of the ultimate existence of the sprout, nature of the sprout itself, would also include that its causes or the signlessness are not ultimately existent, and its wishlessness, its results are not ultimately existent. So while there are the three doors of liberation, they are not contradictory, they are not different entities, because if they were different, then this would contradict the text, because there is one door to liberation, which is emptiness, nothing other than that. So if you were going to say that the three doors of thorough liberation were different entities, that would be contradictory.
to sekta na shinge chaje le sum tela yang kana chaweyul tembar mat pata dia jiga toyi nam thana duigore chidang chepapo tang chaweyul sedugala o chawele chila tene shawgarwa
Yes.
chawele tela mato ko chepapo da chaweyul se yo marwa
Yes.
o teze te chidang chaweyul tembar matwana na tande simpati semeta me ni tina duidu yo so do sungu yo tanam yo.
So in a similar way, we can look at agent, object, and action, because the action lacks true existence, then the agent that accomplishes it and the object also lack true existence. So in the same way that these three, the signlessness and wishlessness, would be included in the door of emptiness.
O tende to chere ta namtar gosum sanata de ta namtar gosum de nambi ke jam bang yung gor bata tu ta tunda tendo ta tunda ke che jeng az tanda shere yunde ngo sum che ta ane cha chele sum che sa ku ya ta the seme da me ni te tonye nam thana la duya ta ro o ta tendo ha ko ya te ke chim ta de ngo shimba namtar gosum az goma yi chana la Kontaro buchiki namtar kosum specha chi logo yorba.
Yes.
Se wishita yor, tati kanzu tantanga dorish. Chado, tasan shimba tsuki pe ikla tuntu nalo tinte se wishita mindwa. Se wishita yor mar. Chadante manche, kundu tamba manche, tanto komangi tina tai gore. Komangi pe, tanto kontaro buchi sungu tina tane.
Yes.
Kosum te tine kundu chiki to tape shungi kachimba tato kintu tu tinte tai gore.
Yes. Okay, so while there are many explanations in relationship to the three doors of thorough liberation, we have covered the most important points that here with applying it to cause, result, and entity, and applying it to agent, object, and action, and that signlessness, the doors of signlessness and wishlessness can be condensed into the door of emptiness. And in terms of the texts that explain this clearly, in the logic text of Gomang, there is a specific text by Komtang Rinpoche that explains this very clearly, whereas most of the other colleges don't have texts that explain it, and in that clearly, and those who want to study in depth and look up the great text refer to this specific text by Kompang Rinpoche.
How to set up the Sharayibu Kapto Gates Tanda de Samukiba Gajet, Yutati, or the Yukon Shana Shirin Tanda Tanda Sashik Chuchugi Kansoke Tunduta Tunduta Dewa Devachira Tatu Tandata Takaji Kunaranzu Chutiki the temper to Patsinto College. Temper to Patsinto College, Takiawata, Gapa, Tantachi, Singi Tantende Yobatan Tachi, Yun say Yobatan, Aneko, Yun de Compedre Yobatan, Tatendele Tende, Cotemba to Patsin Corba, Tunda Padua, Tatide, the Gapa, that Tunda Bame, Ranching to Bame, Serema, the Shem, Seke or Marua.
Okay, so going back to these 8 aspects of the Profound mentioned that we covered in the Heart Sutra, and to remind that relates to the points of the homage and root wisdom. And in general, as ordinary beings, we grasp at the phenomena as truly existent, and similarly we grasp at its arising and ceasing, its characteristics, overcoming faults or increasing qualities. All of these things we grasp it as truly existent, and so therefore in order to cease those ways of grasping, there is these points of the lack of inherent existence of those things.
Tholamgi Tajik Kondashagi Tholam Kapsuta, Tony Muslim to Dugalata, and a Panja Karapan was the cousin among and the young on the Shediwa. Oban Tenzin the Zoo. That Chitako Rangicula never Subasamare, go near weekend a pound or pound or petsa in a blood game ever special. That Tompa Tompan Tenzin Senator Tom Tenzikuntas Tenzikuntas to Kala. Tata, you can say when you so summertime, you can say, Layanda in Go Marek, you can say time in the Mobile. What is Tata, you can sing a one guitar? What that should get the temper to Paresha, some temper to Patet, him the Zimbelo in Gurwa. Paresha, what that today, Lotte Canada. So I'm in a map of social.
Okay, so at the time of the path of seeing, we have a direct perception of emptiness, and therefore we have the true aspects of true existence that are abandoned on the path of seeing, the abandonments of the path of seeing. And these are abandoned such that they will not arise again. And the specific is the artificial true grasping, where independence on either philosophical view or reasoning, and the reasoning doesn't need to be a correct reasoning, because there can be many different reasons that give rise to this, that we grasp for reasonings or philosophy, through reasons or philosophy, that phenomena are truly existent, and this, at the path of seeing, this is completely eliminated.
What is it that Tolam Tele, Tolam Pachimelan, the number lam to the Keshirwa? Pachimelam Sidogala, who's in Botingi Dereva, Munyesi. Namdolam Sidogala, the Pani Pamba top tap, Gordon top, Gordon, Tombata, and the Tenzekunda to the Pambe Pamba. Pamba Topa, the Yam to the Kijo data, the Lamdolam Sirwa. Pachimelam Kapsuta, dire, Rangular Meba Swiss are the Yeneco, Tanta Gordon, the Pambe Pamba, the Tom Medugala, and the Larian, your kiss was a razor, than paying out the Karshosana. Kuma Goni Pachilo, the pin and go my Yamatabu resor. That he just Namdolam Kesona, when you wasn't the top below the that the wasn't the top below the look or shoot Champion to go that. And they look similar Namdolam Kid or Namdolam Kid, that the Pambe Pambate. Tava the top door. That did that go the Larry Kunikuli came or that I didn't see. 대지 콘데시에 군다디 데마토 테도 님도 삼진 별로디다 유니다 게 말이세 거다 다 얘네야 랭게
Yes.
랭게 단다 라디오 마탄다
Yes.
엄마 메메네 콤베 왕게 다지 ngam 슈슈게 긴셀라 마토니 데마토 바레샤스네 나나나 시게 와이서바
Yes.
다데 랭게데 라디오 다데게데 다 곰람기 빵과야 다 곰람기 와야 다데래 네 단다 곰람바리 마마보샤 와라
Yes. Okay. So that in terms of the path of seeing, it's divided into two, of the uninterrupted path and the liberated path. So uninterrupted is referring to the actual antidote. It's kind of when you're applying the antidote, and liberated is when you've actually accomplished the abandonment. You have accomplished a truth of cessation, and that artificial true grasping is abandoned and will not arise again through the strength of your direct perception of lack of true existence. And the illustration that they give to differentiate between the uninterrupted and the liberated path is that when if you have a thief in your house and you throw them out but have not yet closed the door, that's the uninterrupted path where you're applying the antidote but not yet attained the cessation, the actual abandonment of that true grasping. You could say it's possible that it could arise again, but when you close the door, that's like the path of liberation, or the division of the path of liberation, where you actually have the cessation and it will not arise again. That artificial true grasping will not arise again. But there is still a spontaneously arising true grasping that arises through the power of long familiarity without any reason. So there is still that spontaneously arising true grasping, and that is abandoned over the many stages of the path of meditation.
그것도 세파트리 티파도 샤오미도 말베트네 샤오미도
Yes.
그냥 그때 가셔도 시간이 보다 잡고요 지고 저거는 그 실라이트나 이메일 단시나 가도 갈래 랭캡 쪽으로 와.
Okay.
혹시 아래 테스라데 실행기 디바데 될 랭캡샤나 마도야 뭐 뭐란 딱이라서
Lost Hayensidus.
어디 디바데 지랍다던 거.
Okay. So first I say that Geshe, this is what he wanted to cover tonight. So we'll stop here. If people find points difficult, then send an email in to Celia with the questions, and we'll deal with that slowly. Then there's a Shirin had asked specifically about whether we are refuting the ego.
그래다디 나도 안딩을 이고 시에 되더래. 테카레스티
My question, so ego gotcha rest. So gotcha like ego rest.
이거게 율디 가자로 왔다 이거 코란다 셰파테 가고 말고 다시 셰파테 지다 가고 서는 다 남정도 란친세데 가고 와 네 다마시테 때 이거도 란친들 때는 기고 말베 와
네 셰카보레카네 이거기 세니 드라만드라요 엔지날라 데 Dorshigya egogi Dorshigyaton Dramandrau, they gotcha Mursana des Kabu. You know, the Rangchizen. So Geshe said you're not refuting consciousness in terms of the that lies behind the ego, but if you're saying the ego as an object, you would refute it, or ego as relating to the self-centered egotistical mind, we refute. And I just said that because I read Sharon's question as well, and it's quite difficult because everybody, in the West, there's no clear definition of what ego is. Like different schools, philosophers explain it differently. If you look, I looked in the dictionary and so it's hard to identify the characteristics of the ego to refute. The Ranjan Drobagi ego yuna de Gacharoa. If you said it's an inherently existent ego, then that would be your object of refutation.
Yeah,
Okay, so we'll do the dedications. Oh, short mandala dedications. By directing to the field of Buddhas, this mandala is splendid with a base of flowers, saffron water, and incense, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, sun and moon. May all sentient beings be led to this field. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kanyayataya. From my two collections, vast a space that I have amassed from working with this practice for a great length of time, and I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your love and compassion for all my life's Manjushri. May I find the best of complete drag paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by practicing well. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I uphold Buddha's teachings for a very long time. My heart going out with great compassion in whatever directions the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread of decline, may expose this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time by this gradual path to enlightenment, completed due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their spiritual children. May all human and non-human beings who eliminate adversity make them conducive to practicing the excellent paths, never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may he or she always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. And I'm just going to stop the recording.